Lone Druid has traditionally had a very restricted item build. You always went for Radiance, but then 723 kicked the door wide open, and now a whole range of different builds are possible, and that is what we're going to explore in this video.
My holiness deepens.
As you can see, Lone Druid has quite a decent pick rate and a strong win rate, so it's an excellent time to pick up the hero. And in this video we're going to look at skill builds, talents, and of course most importantly item builds. And we're going to look at playing Lone Druid as position 1, 2 and 3. Let's look at the skill and talent build first. This is the standard default build. We see the bear being maxed out first. We see a single point in our Spirit Link at level 2 and a single point in Savage Roar at level 4, and then Spirit Link being maxed out second, talent at level 10, ultimate at 11, 12 and 18, and then last we see the Savage Roar being maxed out when we can, and taking talents whenever we can. In terms of talents, we want to go for the right side talents typically. Level 10 is always the 250 health talents. Level 15, both are quite strong, but usually the Savage Roar cooldown is a bit stronger. Level 20, it's always True Form cooldown, and level 25, always the Spirit Bear attack time. So let's talk first about why we choose the skill build as a standard, and then after that, when you want to deviate from this standard build. So first of all, the bear is just very strong if you max it out. Level 4 bear compared to level 1 bear gets another 900 HP, which is huge. Gets a little bit of HP regen. It gets 0.3 base attack time. That's stronger than level 25 talent. It gets some armor, 3 armor, and it gets 60 movement speed, which is a lot. And also very importantly, perhaps even more importantly than all these benefits, is the increased root time. Level 1 bear only roots for 0.75 seconds, whereas level 4 bear roots for 3 seconds, so that's much stronger. And also your demolish ability, the bonus damage to buildings, increases from 10% to 40%. So almost always you're going to max out the Spirit Bear first. Then Spirit Link scales really well, the attack speed scales linearly, and the lifesteal is almost linear. It's an ability that's very strong if it's maxed out, gives you a lot of sustain and just DPS from the increased attack speed. And then Savage Roar is more of a utility ability that's very useful to have at least one point of, allows you to cancel TPs, allows you to get out of many sticky situations. And it scales reasonably well. It has double duration at max level and almost half the cooldown, so it's also an ability that scales well, but just not quite as well as these other two. And it doesn't help us farm. So typically you want to max out these two first and then Savage Roar last, almost always. When you take this point in Savage Roar, kind of varies. Sometimes you're forced to take it at level 2 already. This is when you're playing against some sort of lane that can just run at you and has kill potential against you, then you just have to take this first. In other situations, it can also be used just as a tool for last hitting. You can roll the enemy and then get last hits and denies. If you don't really need the sustain and this attack speed, especially in mid, it can be viable to just get level 2 Savage Roar just for last hitting. And then there's some lanes where you're laning against, say, 2 ranged heroes who don't really want to get on top of you, and it's more about trading. And in these lanes, you want to delay your point into Savage Roar and get it at level 6 or possibly even later. And then this ultimate, typically you take it at level 11 and 12. The level 1 ultimate doesn't really help you farm, it's more fighting ability, but if you're getting involved into a lot of early game fighting, you might want to put a point in here much earlier, maybe at level 8 or something like that. And then talents, the attack range talent is not very useful, so you always go for the health one. This health talent is also just not very strong, which is why occasionally you see some people delay this talent a little bit in favor of getting an earlier level of true form at level 10. Then level 15, both talents are very strong. Spirit Bear armor is obviously amazing, but Savage Row cooldown is so strong, reducing Savage Row cooldown from 20 to 8 is incredibly strong. If you have to disable at an 8-second cooldown, 2.4 second duration disable, that's now around both your hero and your bear. And also the radius was increased a little bit in 723, so this is why you now usually see people go for the Savage Row cooldown. It's just so much utility in team fights and just generally in any sort of fighting. Level 20, you always go for the True Form cooldown. True Form has a very strong ability. It heals you, it makes you almost unkillable. And Entangle cooldown is not that great. In the late game, roots are not that strong anymore. It doesn't work against BKB, can be dispelled, it doesn't stop the enemy from attacking. So this Entangle cooldown is just not that relevant. And then level 25, almost always the Spirit Bear attack time. True Form health just not that important. You already have like 3,000 or 4,000 HP, which should be plenty in True Form. So this Spirit Bear attack time is just so much stronger. It gives you so much DPS, and it's just an excellent late game talent. Now onto item builds. You always want to get a Quelling Blade with your bear at the start. It just helps you a lot with last hitting. Last hitting is actually not that easy with the Lone Druid as it used to be, because you only have 20 base damage on your bear and 40 on your hero, so that's 60 in total, which is kind of okay, but it's no longer amazing as it used to be. So Quelling Blade is essential. And generally you also want to buy a Town Portal on your bear. This allows you to TP back your bear to base when he gets injured, so you don't always have to use Resummon. And it also allows you to pick up items without having to use Courier. So this is just a very efficient way of healing the bear. And of course you can not buy this TP and then have it shipped out in your Courier. But the problem with that is that you then have to manually put it on your bear, because if you just use hotkeys to deliver it, it will just deliver to your hero, so you have to use it manually and then return with the courier. So that's kind of annoying, and often it's something that can easily get the courier killed if you're not being careful. So it's easier just to start out with a TP scroll on your bear. So that's 200 gold down. If you're not in mid, you definitely want to get a set of tangos. Depending on what kind of lane you're facing in, you're going to get an extra set of regen, either tangos or a salve. Lone Druid is one of these heroes that can usually get away with buying less regen than other heroes, because you have this ban to tank for you, you have the Spirit Link to heal you, and you're not really using much mana. So oftentimes you're fine with a single set of tangos, but in some lanes you need more. Sometimes maybe even 2 sets of tangos and a salve. Then with the remaining gold, if you can afford to get it, a Venom is very strong. Other than that, just a couple of branches and maybe fairy fires. So depending on how much gold you have left, just fill up your inventory with cheap and efficient items on your Druid. So if you're in mid, your starting items might look something like this. You have an Venom, Quelling Blade and DP on your bear, and then you have Iron Branches and 2 shared tangos on your main hero. This is the build you want to go for if you have a hero you can easily harass at the start with this Venom. If you're playing as some sort of range hero that likes to hang back a lot, maybe Venom is not that crucial as a starting item. If you don't want to start out with Venom, this is another possibility you can go for. Quelling Blades and Town Portal on your bear, that's 200 gold. And then you can get 3 branches and 2 fairy fires, and start out with the salve that spends all your starting gold, and then you don't have to use the courier right at the start, so it doesn't get sniped or anything like that. This build gives you a lot more damage, obviously, some extra damage from these 2 fairy fires and extra branch, but doesn't have the Venom, so it's better last hitting, but worse harassing. And then of course you still want to get this Venom on your courier later. If you want to start out with an Venom in the side lanes, it's a bit tougher to make it work in terms of budget. So you have this Venom, Quelling Blade and TP Scroll, that's 500 gold, leaving only enough gold for 1 set of tangos, which means that you don't have any extra stats, making it harder to trade and last hit. Instead, I'll often go for something like this, where you have this only Quelling Blade and the TP on your bear, and then you have 3 Iron Branches and 2 Fairy Fires, giving you a lot of extra damage and stats, and it just makes last hitting a lot easier in lane. And then with your first 300 gold, you go for that Overvenom. Or if you're worried about your bear being harassed in lane, you can go for this. You can go for a Ring of Protection at the start on your bear, together with the Quelling Blade and the Town Portal Scroll, and then only have those 3 branches here in your inventory, still giving you a good amount of stats. And this Ring of Protection can then be built into a Buckler, which eventually combines into an Assault Cuirass or possibly a Vlad's. Now let's look at the core items you almost always want to get on Lone Druid. First, we all talked about Overvenom. If you don't start with it, it is usually the first investment you make. Then you want to get a phase boost. This is an excellent item on Lone Druid. Gives you a good amount of damage, some armor which Spirit Bear is desperately lacking, and of course extra movement speed is excellent. Sometimes you also go for a Blightstone. Of course, if you go for Desolator build, obviously you go for Blightstone at the start, but even if you don't plan on going for Desolator, it can still be quite a useful item, quite valuable for its cost, increases damage that you and your bear do. And after that, you typically go for a Mask of Madness. Madness is an excellent item on this new Spirit Bear. The attack speed obviously is great, and the lifesteal is also quite strong because this bear is no longer healed by Spirit Link, it only heals the hero. So your bear needs some sort of sustain, which Mask of Madness provides. And then, of course, the downside of Mask of Madness is the armor, which hurts, but the silence doesn't hurt very much. So even if you're silenced, you can still use Savage Roar on your hero and it will still roar around your bear. So this is no longer much of a downside, only the armor is really a problem. On your hero, you definitely want to have Boots of Speed, and you want to buy a stick, possibly upgrading it to a wand. It is just a really efficient item, and since you have the slots to spare, this is a great investment. When you buy your boots and your stick or wand, depends on the game. Typically, you want to get Boots of Speed after you get your phase boot, or even delaying it until after you get your Mask of Madness. The Lone Druid himself is reasonably quick, but he's not that quick, so if you don't have boots, you definitely can't keep up with your bear. Your bear's just so much faster, especially if you use Mask of Madness. And if your bear, of course, outruns a hero, you can't attack anymore. So at some point, you do want to get those boots, especially when you start fighting with a hero. But it also helps you out when you're farming to some extent. So far, all of this applies regardless of your position. But after this, it depends on whether you're playing him as position 1 or 2, or whether you're playing as a 3. So 1 and 2 are very similar in terms of item builds, but 3 can be quite different. So let's first talk about position 1 and 2, which is the more usual position to play Lone Druid in. Here there are 3 items to choose from, which are the centerpiece of your item build. And these items are the classic Radiance, then there's the Desolator build, or we can go for the Maelstrom into Mjolnir build. All these 3 items are viable choices, and which one you choose depends on the game. So Radiance is the classical build. In this patch, it has fallen off in popularity because early game fighting has become more important, and also the bear just scales a lot better into the late game with some of these other items. So Radiance offers you sort of a fixed amount of damage per second through that burn, so that doesn't scale as well. But because Lone Druid himself, because of the static bear which doesn't get attribute bonuses, used to be more of a mid-game all-inish kind of hero. Like, you're really strong at something like 20 minutes when you get your Radiance. finished, and then you have your peak and you want to push towers, go high ground before 30 minutes and end the game as soon as possible. But in this new patch, your bear scales with your levels. If you level up, your bear also gets extra HP and damage. So it's no longer as important to end the game early, and therefore these more scaling items like Mjolnir become more attractive compared to this less scaling Radiance. But Radiance is still a very viable build, so it depends a bit on the situation, whether you can really afford to sort of leave your team more or less alone between like 10 and 20 minutes when you're farming that Radiance, or if you have to be more active with your team and get more involved, you probably want to go for one of these other two item builds. The Desolator is the fastest of these three builds. It is an incredibly efficient item. On the bear, comes online quickly, it's not very expensive, and it gives you a massive amount of single target damage. And the Desolator basically makes Lone Druid better at everything he's already good at. So Lone Druid, especially the Spirit Bear, is really good at single target damage and at killing buildings. And this is exactly what the Desolator offers you more of. So this is a kind of snowbally kind of item where you have a strong early game, and then you get this Desolator and then you push down all the enemy towers. You can take Roshan easily with this item. It's great against Roshan, and you're very good against buildings. And with this item, you can often just finish games early. Desolator and armor reduction in general is best against targets that have low armor, so this makes it more of an early game item. Later on in the game, when heroes have a lot of armor, this becomes a little bit weaker. And this also means that Desolator is weaker against heroes that just naturally have a lot of armor, like a Terrorblade, for example. And because Desolator is so strong if you get it early, oftentimes you see people getting Desolator before Mask of Madness and then getting the mask afterwards. And then finally we have the Mjolnir build. You start out with this Maelstrom, which has an excellent build up. Get this Javelin first usually, and then this Mithril Hammer. This is an excellent efficient item on its own. And then you get this Mjolnir upgrade, which oftentimes you get right away. Sometimes you get like another item or two first and then finish the Mjolnir. But either way, it's an excellent item, offers a lot of attack speed as well as a good amount of single target damage. And of course, a huge amount of AoE damage. This is the item of choice against illusion heroes, against any sort of lineup that requires a lot of wave clear, because this Mjolnir this damage just scales a lot better than the Radiance burn, which is static. And of course, a major advantage that this Mjolnir build offers over the Desolator build is that you farm much faster. So this is sort of a more balanced build that allows you to fight early thanks to these efficient components of Maelstrom, but it also allows you to farm. But of course you don't have this strong timing that Desolator gives you. And with this build especially, your building damage kind of suffers. So you have a lot of attack speed, which is nice for building damage, but then you only get 24 damage against buildings. Of course, lightning doesn't work against buildings. So Mjolnir is kind of the opposite of what Desolator does. Desolator gives you more of what Spirit Bear already has, whereas Mjolnir makes up for your weaknesses. It makes up for the fact that you have no flash farming by giving you this lightning, and it gives you attack speed, which the bear lacks. So what's the next step after you've chosen one of these big three items? Well, one possibility is just to go for another one of these. So if you started out with Mjolnir, you can get a Desolator next, or vice versa, both work. So for example, I covered one game of Arteezy where it starts out with a Desolator, hits this early timing, and then he goes back for the Mjolnir. This is very viable. You have a little bit of anti-synergy here because you have this Mjolnir which gives you magic damage, and then this Desolator which amplifies your physical damage with the armor reduction. But that's fine. It's not a huge deal to have this slight amount of anti-synergy. So even if you go for Mjolnir, you still do a lot of physical damage, which Desolator of course amplifies. Another strong possibility is the good old Assault Cuirass. This item got buffed in 723. It's always been a strong item on Lone Druid, and it's even slightly stronger in this patch, especially if we went for the Desolator build. AC is a strong follow-up to Desolator. It gives you attack speed, which the Desolator build inherently lacks because you only have Massive Bandits for attack speed. It obviously even more armor reduction, and armor reduction stacks with increasing returns for the same reason that armor reduction is good against low armor targets. Stacking additional forms of armor reduction is great, and it also of course solves some of your armor problems. So I see an excellent item. Problem with this is it also doesn't help me farm. So you go for this build, you're a little bit all in because you have only single target damage, you don't farm very quickly, so this is a kind of item build to go for if you want to either end the game early or you're not the position one, you have some sort of other hero team who's the true carry, and it's okay to fall off a little bit in the late game. AC is also an excellent follow-up to the Radiance build for obvious reasons. This is the standard Lone Druid build from days of yore. It gives you attack speed, which synergizes well with the damage from Radiance and protects your bear, making him even more tanky and able to endure longer and burn the enemy for longer periods of time. And if you go for this AC, you notice that it now has 5 attributes. So there's an argument to be made to actually put this item on your main hero. The problem is that this attack speed and armor, of course, is a lot stronger on the bear. So I would argue that it's still better to have this on your bear as long as you can spare the slot. And then late game, if you have some other strong items here, then you can start passing this AC to your hero and getting some extra item, such as a Basher, for example, which is, of course, more important to have on your bear than just to have your AC on the bear. Speaking of Basher, that's a great item to have as long as you have a decent amount of attack speed. So if you have this Mask of Madness and Mjolnir, that's enough attack speed to get some good payoff from this Basher. And of course later can be upgraded to Abyssal Blade, which is a very strong item in this patch. Allows you to have some initiation and just a strong overall late game upgrade. Another great item that also goes well with your Basher is Moonshot. It's just straight up raw attack speed, which is excellent on the bear. Bear of course suffers from the fact that he has no attributes, so he doesn't get any attack speed from agility. So you just need to run these raw attack speed items, and Moonshot is of course an excellent item in the late game. And generally speaking, I would actually not consume this Moonshot unless you absolutely have to. I'd rather sell a Mask of Madness first and consume the Moonshot only after that if you're in another slot, because just this 140 attack speed is so much on the bear. So with all this attack speed, especially with the level 25 talent, you just root and bash the enemy for so much that it's very hard for them to do anything. So this Basher Moonshot combination is very strong in the late game. Another very strong item obviously is BKB, especially if you did not go for the Radiance build. Being kited is a big problem, and being disabled is a big problem, so BKB helps with that and helps you actually get out the damage that's the deal. If your enemies have evasion, obviously MKB is a strong item, don't have to elaborate on that. And Daedalus generally is not an item you buy all that often on the bear, because it doesn't give any attack speed and doesn't solve any of the pressing needs that the bear has. But if you're starting to get into this very, very late game situation, Daedalus might be worth picking up. On your hero, as the game gets later, you start to accumulate more items. Often you pick up all these utility neutral items that your supports and other cores eventually don't have room anymore. And in addition to that, you can also buy aura items. This, of course, obviously, a C can be moved to your main hero, and your bear no longer has slots. You can also buy something like a Vlad's. This is a pretty strong item. It's not any particular strong synergy with your bear or with your hero, but it's just an item you can buy. Helps out your bear some and helps out your team. So why not buy this later on when you have some gold to spare and you're sort of running out of slots on your bear. Solar Crest is also an excellent item to have on your hero, because you can put it on your bear. It gives your bear extra attack speed and movement speed. Can be very efficient. Of course, it's quite an expensive item, so it's more of a luxury kind of item, not an item you want to go for super early. Speaking of luxury items, Aghanims is one such item. What it does is it allows your bear to attack even when it's far away from your hero. Also means that if your hero dies, your bear still survives. But there's an item that doesn't increase your bear's DPS by anything, doesn't improve your bear's survivability in any way. All it does is allows you to split push more easily. So this is not an item you want to go for early. It's more like a late game kind of item, especially if you're losing the game and you have to resort to sort of split pushing. But you never really plan on getting this item except when it's in a very, very late game and you're running out of slots. Let's now talk about position 3 Lone Druids. If you're position 3, you can still go for one of these big 3 DPS items, Desolator, Maelstrom or Radiance, but then you're not really playing position 3. You're playing something that's more like a position 2 or even 1 from the off lane. But if you want to go for like a real position 3, then what you typically go for is more of the aura and utility items. You go for things like a drum, which actually has quite a good build up. You can get this Gloves of Haste, which is an excellent value item on your bear. And you can get this crown and your windlace on your main hero and then upgrade it to drums. And this actually gives a very nice aura for your bear. The active is also great for your bear. And this is a fairly efficient item, allows you to do some good early game fighting. You still want the phase boost and Mask of Madness first, but with these items combined, you can do a lot of efficient early game fighting. And if you're playing real position 3, where you're trying to enable your other 2 cores, this is a good item to go for. Another item in that category would be Vlad's. Offers a lot of value to your team and just helps you with team fighting, with sustaining. Of course, you can still then go for something like a Desolator to give you some DPS to go with that Mask of Madness. You can also go for something like a Pipe if your team needs it. There's a lot of utility stuff that you can buy. Of course, Solar Crest, also a possibility. Gives a lot of value to your bear and also can be used on your other teammates. And of course, AC is also excellent on this position 3 Lone Druid. It offers a lot of value to your bear as well as, of course, to your team with the aura. If you want to see more about this position 3 playstyle, I made a video about that of 33 playing that, which is linked up here. Neutral items can also be a great help for Lone Druid just because you have so many slots available, which means that you can just soak up all these neutral items that the rest of your team no longer has slots for. So I've made an entire video on that where you get more detail about which neutral items are the most important, which give you the most value, and which should maybe better left off for your team, at least until they run out of slots. You can check that out, also linked in the top right. And now finally, let's talk briefly about 2 items that you should avoid going for on Lone Druids. The first is Wraith Bans. Wraith Bans offer you a good amount of value in the early game when the right-click damage from your hero is still relevant. The problem though with going for a Wraith Ban or 2 is that these items don't scale well. It doesn't make sense to split up your right-click items between your bear and your hero. Right-click items synergize with each other, attack speed items make damage items more effective, and damage items make attack speed items more effective. So combining both these kinds of items onto one unit is a lot more efficient than splitting it up between two. So the Wraith Band just doesn't help your bear at all, which means that it's become a waste of gold in the mid to late game, and you're better off just investing that gold into getting like an earlier phase boost, an earlier Mask of Madness, and so on. And instead you should just maybe get a couple of branches. Branches are a very efficient item. The second item to avoid is Helm of the Dominator. Now, I'm not going to say the Helm of the Dominator is a horrible item on Lone Druid, but Lone Druid has literally no synergy with the item. So it gives you attributes which are not that important on Lone Druid. It gives you this region aura, which is not that great on Lone Druid. It gives you this extra creep, which is okay, I guess, but no particular synergy there, because you no longer have this battle cry ability that you used to have, which gives a flat bonus damage to all units you control and nearby, which of course is great with Dominator units, but that doesn't exist anymore. And you also don't benefit a lot from this aura, which gives you a percentage-based damage boost, but because your Spirit Bear only has 20 base damage, this is almost nothing. 30% of 20 is 6, so this gives you 6 damage on your bear. This is absolutely nothing, completely irrelevant. This is not a good item on Lone Druid. And also, Dominator is best if you get it early, and there's so many very efficient early game items you want to go for on your bear. There's Phase Boots, these Mask of Madness and so on, Quelling Blade, Orb of Venom, Blightstone. These items are great on the bear if you get them early, and that conflicts with your Helm of Dominator. So it's just not an item you want to have on Lone Druid. So I hope this video has helped you with itemization. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section and tell me what is your favorite build on Lone Druid. Subscribe to this channel for more content on Lone Druids and Shen and various other micro heroes. And in the meantime, I will leave you with a couple of other Lone Druids guides covering position 1, 2, and 3. And Obelisk building. I'll see you there.